In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Bryan Frye, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Nathan Lutz, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights to the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I am your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today are my good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Dustin Melbardis from deep in the heart of Texas. How you doing, sir?
Good evening. Rudy Gobert is a Timberwolf.
Yeah, it's weird.
It never works out for anybody, though. I mean, that's the kiss of death. So
it's weird.
It's not Sacramento.
It's weirder than Seattle not having a team. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not full
Sacramento.
and it's not full Sacramento. It's not Miami Dolphins. It's
Well, I mean, it's we could talk NBA for another 2 hours, but that's just what's on my mind. On my birthday, that trade came across. On my own birthday, I lost my favorite player on my favorite team.
Ouch.
Oh, that's harsh.
Yeah,
and to boot, it's probably 1,000,000 degrees in Texas in July.
Yeah, but I always talk about how hot it is. I wanted to bring up something that wasn't the triple-digit temperatures.
So I was going to contrast that from where it's hot to where it's not. Mr. Bryan Frye from Spokane, Washington. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm good. We're all the way up to 70 degrees today. So I mean, it's we had a couple of days.
It's paradise, you know.
Don't worry, it's a dry heat, right, Dustin?
Sure. Yeah. Whatever.
Whatever works.
Sure. Yeah.
So today, let's break the ice here a little bit. What is a movie that most sucks you in when it aired on TV? Like, you might own the movie, and for no good reason, you're now stuck watching cable television with TV ads and the whole shebang, turning a regular movie into a 4-hour endeavor. What movie do you love so much that it'll hook you like this, Bryan?
The one that always seems to get me, and it's always on TNT, is The Fugitive. Like it's like I guess I'm watching TNT for the next hour and a half. Like, it doesn't even matter where it is in the movie. And then more likely than not, what'll end up happening is I'll watch it from whatever point in time it aired to the end, and then I will find it, whether it's digital or CD or whatever, and I'll pop it in and then watch it in its entirety, because that's where I am now.
TNT's tricky. They can get you after like if they get you around a basketball game,
Yep.
Then they got you for a whole movie too. And then Ted Turner has your whole weekend.
Yeah. And especially if they're doing, I remember growing up and I would just be crossing my fingers, praying, can't wait for the 007 Days of Christmas. It didn't even matter what Bond movies were playing. I'd just leave it on TBS or whatever that was on. And that's it. That was all I watched from December, 15th through the 22nd.
15 Days of 007. It was great. Dustin, how about you? What's a movie that just will hook you in?
Maybe my favorite of the ones that could hook me in is Con Air with Nicolas Cage, John Malkovich. I had Raising Arizona early on as like a thing why growing up I liked Nick Cage. And I know that he gets some flack for his movie choices and his performances. But I was in like a nice little bubble of liking Nick Cage's stuff before stuff like Bangkok Dangerous came out. So for me, it's Con Air.
That is a good movie. Yeah, that's definitely a good one.
So I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard it through the grapevine that the reason he had that string of terrible movies there for a while is he got in so much debt from buying European castles that he basically had to greenlight every project that came across his desk, Netflix style, to get out of it.
Let's hope it's true.
And what ended up happening is now he's back. I guess he's flush again. And that's why he's completely slaying it the last 2 years with these movies, because he can do his own projects again.
As for me, the movie that will just suck me in is one that we just did. You said TNT, Frye, and they are the culprits for me as well. The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, they do play Shawshank a lot.
One or two lines of Morgan Freeman's narration. You could even just not even see the screen. You just kind of slowly start to move your way towards the screen, and then you're kind of like, well, this seat looks pretty comfortable, and then you don't even It could happen right before commercial break.
I'll go to the post office tomorrow.
I'll give TNT that cred. I mean, they have kept up with a good, stable pool of very watchable movies for a very long time. That combined with their basketball programming and whatnot really does make them a must-have channel.
I get done though, and I'm sitting there going like, I own this movie. Why am I watching it on TV?
Can we send this episode in like an email to TNT being like, hey, partnership?
That's true. Our numbers are up, Ted. Come right. Sponsor the show.
TNT, RMR. I mean, the letters are so close.
That's right.
UBTNT,
the All 80s Movies podcast is sponsoring us. So now.
There we go. Excellent.
There you go. What's the last movie you saw, Dustin?
13, with a young Evan Rachel Wood, Nikki Reed, and then Holly Hunter plays the mom. A coming-of-age tale that I think I'm in this little era right now, this little 2000 to 2008, kind of in that movie watching era right now. And so I think that one was either 2001 or 2003, but it's great. Little coming-of-age story, stressors of being a young teenage girl. Very cool movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies that have 13 in the title. You can go on a whole run of those.
You could.
The 13th Floor, Friday the 13th. 13 going on 30. I
think there's like a
cap it all off.
Yeah, Thor-teen, Love and Thunder.
All right, Frye, what about you? What's the last movie you saw?
Earlier today, I watched The Untouchables, which is probably another movie I would stop on TNT and watch if it came on.
The last movie I saw was The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, which was panned at the time, but I'm not going to lie, I had a good time.
I think that's one I've caught in pieces on TV only. I don't know the full film.
It's absurd. As long as you don't go in expecting filet mignon. Sometimes you just want a grilled cheese sandwich, and that's okay.
It's okay.
Today's movie is what, Dustin?
Collateral from 2004.
All right. Collateral stars Tom Cruise, Jamie Foxx, Jada Pinkett Smith, and Mark Ruffalo. It comes out in the year 2004. It has a budget of $65 million, and it grosses $101 million. It places at 23rd in the box office that year, coming in just behind The Aviator and ahead of $1 Million Baby. If you need a pick-me-up, avoid that last one that I mentioned there. So Shrek 2 is the number one movie from 2004. IMDb gives Collateral a 7.5. The critics of Rotten Tomatoes like it a fair bit more at 86%. And the audience score is right about there as well at 84%. It is nominated for 2 Academy Awards for Best Supporting Actor to Jamie Foxx and Best Film Editing. Golden Globes also gave Jamie Foxx a Best Supporting Actor nomination. It won the BAFTA for Best Cinematography, and it took 5 other nominations away, so the BAFTAs gave it quite a bit of attention. And the AFI's top 10 of 2004, so this is just not any of the 100 greatest of all times, but just the top 10 of 2004, which there's no ranking. They just named 10 movies to avoid controversy. Dustin, this is your dealer's choice. I'm going to take it you've seen this before.
That's right. I picked this one, and I was happy to revisit it. I had watched this in 2005 and 2006. We had bought the DVD, so we were watching this. Just a bunch of guys. We'd hang out every weekend. We're putting 2 Xboxes together and playing Halo or Halo 2, and we're eating fast food and we're drinking generic Mountain Dew and the generic Dr. Pepper. And this was one of the movies that we kind of had on rotation where we'd have it on all the time, even if we weren't sitting down and watching it. So I'd seen it a bunch, but it was a gift to be able to 15 years later come back and say, like, let's look at this critically, because I had seen it a lot, but to sit down and focus on it for real was a real treat.
You could be honest, you were drinking Zimas.
Oh man, I pounded 2 Zimas in a row. Picture this, to try to impress a girl, but yes. This was a
yes.
Sorry, they were not Zimas. They were Smirnoff Ices. But no, this was before I took the turn into alcohol. We were just playing video games and drinking soda. No Zimas at the time.
Bryan, this seems like it's going to be up your alley. I'm taking it you've seen this one as well.
Yes, I have this movie. I actually can't tell you whether or not I saw this in theaters or not. I honestly don't remember if this was a theater experience for me. No, it was a super enjoyable movie. And I haven't watched it probably in 10 years, so I'm glad it came back around again.
Yeah. I definitely saw this when it hit the DVD stores, the rental stores. I saw Ray, and which Ray comes out just a little after this. I saw Ray in the theaters, and even though Collateral came out before Ray that same year, after I saw Ray, I was like, wow, Jamie Foxx. Didn't know you had that in you. Like, what else have you got here? And so I picked up Collateral, and it was fine. It went down. I was expecting a little more intensity somehow to it than that, and it faded from memory, and I didn't come back to it at all until it got picked again for the show. So a lot of it had faded from my memory, so I was certainly due for a refreshing, and I gave it a much closer look as well. And I will say, it's a movie that upon further evaluation, there's substance there that, a typical kind of all-in-one-night action movie would not have. So I'm going to give it some credit over perhaps what its synopsis alone would imply that it is.
I completely agree that it is, upon a second watch, whether it's, sometimes for the show we watch it twice, maybe even 3 times. I only had one rewatch because I had seen it so many times, but even in just one, you pick up on things. Might I say it's more enjoyable if you already know what's going on? Maybe. I don't know if that's ever fair to say. I like to try to put myself in the shoes of someone that's never watched it, and like what surprises what traps are set for the new watcher. But I think coming back to it, it still had plenty to offer, whether it's smaller details or thanks to being around guys like you, picking up on the decisions to change focus, or the top-down camera scenes of LA, things that like I hadn't picked up before being on a movie podcast.
Yeah, it's not a popcorn movie. It's not like I said, there's craft in there, and that's something I did not pick up on as much. And perhaps it's just me, like you said, maybe I've grown to appreciate movies at more levels.
Because we've done several Tom Cruise movies in the podcast's history, I've really got to give hats off to him. I forget sometimes just the breadth of movies he's been in, and the quality really that most of them have. Like, he has very few mummies in his closet.
Yeah, I was actually.
He's not in The Mummy, is he?
He's got.
He was in the fourth. Yeah. Wasn't the fourth Mummy movie?
Oh no, was he in that one?
Like the Monsters universe,
it was like the China, like where they go to China.
No, I'm sorry, fifth Mummy movie.
They go bad after a point.
There's another one.
Unrelated
another one
Brendan
without
Fraser
Brendan
stuff.
Fraser.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Unrelated. Oh,
yeah. And it's pretty. How recent are we looking at? 4 years on that?
2017.
Okay. Yeah.
5 years.
Where it was sort of like I think you had The Mummy, and I know that we had a cool re-envisioning of like The Invisible Man, but this was part of like a supposed revamp of the Monsters universe that I don't think ever really panned out.
No, I mean he had a couple in there that were questionable, the Night and Days of the world, but no, I think by and large he's got a very quality.
I agree. I actually, so much so. The Night and Day is Cameron Diaz in it, correct?
Yes.
So much so that I was like, Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz, take me there. I went to theaters to see it.
I was kind of excited to see that as well, and I was sitting there. It's not their faults, by the way. I don't think it's the actors' faults, either one of them.
Oh, I don't either. But it is sandwiched by two of my favorite Tom Cruise movies, in Valkyrie and Ghost Protocol. So, both of those were fantastic. So I was like, yeah, all right, you get that one. That's fine. You can toss me a curveball every once in a while. And the other compliment I'll give Tom is so many actors have hit this point with me personally where they've done too many movies in a year, 2 years, 3 years. They get really popular. They put them in everything. And then I get burnt out. Tom Cruise really does pace himself. And I also appreciate that.
Yeah. We're not inundated with Tom Cruise flicks.
Yeah, and we will be spoiling this movie as we go ahead. So if you have not seen Collateral, come back and we will spoil this movie after this.
Welcome to the All 80s Movies Podcast.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Jason. And this is the podcast where we talk about the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between from one of the freshest decades for movies, the 1980s. So whether you're a brain, a jock, a valley girl, or a Jedi, we've got some 80s classics for you.
Do these movies stand the test of time? Are we discovering something new? Is there an 80s movie we're finally watching for the first time?
Join us each week as we dive into the cinematic nostalgia that inspired and influenced a generation. From the hits to the cult classics, we'll discuss our earliest memories, favorite scenes, fun facts, and our not-so-favorite movie moments, too.
It's the All 80s Movies Podcast, now available on all major streaming platforms. Please subscribe and happy listening.
All right, we're back, and this is your final warning. There will be spoilers that lie ahead. So, Dustin, for those who haven't seen Collateral since 2004, we want to refresh people's memories.
5 stops, 5 hits for ice-veined assassin Vincent. Just landed in L.A. and looking to make his dirty work quick, so he hires a cabbie for the night. Max. 6 bills do the convincing, and Max agrees to take Vincent around L.A. The first hit results in the mark falling onto Max's cab, nearly crushing the vehicle. But the ensuing argument turns into a forced agreement to ferry the killer around town. Vincent dispatches the man in the penthouse and also guns down 2 criminals before they are off to seek the third target at a jazz club. Arriving at the scene of the first victim is narcotics detective Ray Fanning, whose arc fills us in on Vincent's mission to eliminate key witnesses in an upcoming federal trial. In a packed club, Vincent saves Max from getting shot, takes out target number 4, and pressures Max to keep moving. Moved by their philosophical discussions ongoing throughout the night, Max has finally had enough and intentionally crashes his cab. Vincent escapes, but Max realizes from the leftover intel that the last target is a prosecutor he had met earlier in the day and rushes to her aid, beginning in a high-rise and culminating on the MTA, where a quick hunt results in a mortal wound for Vincent and leaves Max and Annie to exit the train and recover as a new dawn approaches.
Does it, though? Just want to say, Jess and I had this conversation when we watched it together this last time. She was like, he needs to double tap, and he goes through his whole monologue about the, person dies on the subway and nobody notices. I was like, turn around, that body's gone.
Oh yeah. Like is it a choice to leave it as a question to the audience? I wouldn't go so far. I think
he's dead.
I think you have, but I do like that. You said your wife raised that question. Like, I don't know.
My wife's favorite Zombieland rule that she has now spread to every facet of our movie and television watching is Rule 2: double tap.
Well, Cruise does that. He shoots people in the chest twice and then once in the head.
100%. And she's like, that is correct. But I'm saying who didn't do that? Jamie Foxx.
Right.
So, no.
He also didn't have any ammo left, though. If you notice the slot, if you notice this,
he could have picked up Tom's gun. He could have put up. He could have picked up.
No, you have to remember, and we're jumping right to the end of the movie. Vincent was out of ammo too. They both were.
Yeah, but he was in the process of reloading when he realized he'd been shot.
No, he's reaching.
He drops that.
This got heated fast.
He's reaching for his replacement mags that he typically keeps around his hip, and he realized they're not there. He is out of bullets at the end of the movie.
Wow. Deep discussion.
He goes to
because he has the security guard's gun at that point.
He's at a point where they both don't have. The only reason I think that Max doesn't have any ammo left is the slide is stuck back on that weapon.
No, I think you're right. I think they both emptied, but Max had Vincent's gun. Vincent had the dead security guard's gun.
Yeah. It is fun to immediately jump to the end of the movie and be like, is he dead?
Hey, we already ruined it, man. Just deal. Like, listeners, we already ruined it for you. We gave you a fast forward of the first, hour and 35 minutes of the movie. We're going right at it.
Yep. From 0 to 100. So, it's interesting, though, from the get-go, why Max? Why does Vincent need Max to have a cab driver drive him around town? I found myself troubled by that the first time I watched this movie. And, he says you're good at what you do and you know the city and stuff. But I did find myself wondering, it seems like it's an inevitable added mess. He talks about drawing attention, and inevitably this is attention, and that he's drawing more people in. Why doesn't Tom Cruise rent a car? I'm just going to ask it right away.
We don't know why, but we do know that this is part of his MO. The movie insinuates that he has done this before in San Francisco. 3 deaths, along with then the death of another cab driver. Through whether that's from Ray Fanning's arc where we learn that, or somewhere along the lines we learn that this has happened before. This is just part of how he operates. And he almost doesn't. If you remember, Max is kind of still a little starstruck from his meeting with Annie when Vincent walks up to his cab, and he's only seconds away from walking to the next one. So it's not even special about picking Max. He was just the cab that was closest.
I like to think that as a professional hitman, choosing a cab is just adds to the ambiguity of what you're doing, because you've got, the fingerprints of God knows how many people in the back of that car, hair samples, whatever. I would think it would be nearly impossible to track down any physical evidence based on using a cab.
Oh, that's fair, but I mean, I would think you'd have your summer intern who you hired with your giant commission just to be your driver, is what I'm getting at.
There is a world behind, where Vincent comes from that is really not explored at all. But yeah, your initial question, like, why didn't he just rent a car? Well, he could have. Then it's not a movie. But we know that. Sure.
Yeah. But it is kind of a hostage situation. It's he's placed in a position where he can't get out of, and it only raises the stakes more. He becomes more and more sucked in, and it's kind of like the more you move, the more it takes you, like quicksand. And, it gets really out of hand for him by the time Vincent says, "Oh, let's go see your mother," and he doesn't want him to know where she is, and doesn't want him to go in, and that becomes even more leverage over him. And it's interesting to see the harder and harder Max wants to get out of this, the more and more Vincent sticks to him.
So do you guys think that Max gets the girl in the end?
Yes. Saving her life is a very good, second impression.
Do you think that 18 odd years later, she probably has him smacking customers accidentally on television?
I think he has his own limo service, for one. I think he has the financial get up to go. I think he has the guts after this night. After his life has been threatened, I think he has it in him. Because I think that's probably my favorite thing upon returning to this. Max's transformation. He can't get his life going. He can't start this cab business. He's been thinking about it for 11 years that he's been driving cabs, and he's kind of kicking around. He's probably totally capable of doing it. If you can make a cab in LA look as nice as he's done, and treat people and be as charismatic as he is and knows the driving routes, there's absolutely no reason, short of purchasing a vehicle, that would stop him. And it's himself who's stopping himself from doing this.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. And I think that's one of the things I like about Max's character, because I see a lot of myself in that. I mean, you start doing something, it works out well, you're good at it. It's easy to get, if it's not your end goal and you have something else, I totally get that. That's 100% accurate in terms of what happens in real life.
Yeah, he's become comfortable driving this cab, which he says to 2 different people, the 2 important fares of the movie, Annie and Vincent,
and the 2 most important fares of the rest of his life.
True, yeah. That this is temporary, and Annie maybe believes him, but Vincent sees right through him, especially once he learns how long he's been doing it. And I think he gives him a really early barb, maybe 20 or 25 minutes in. Vincent asks Max, why do you drive a cab, or something like that, or what's your dream? What are you interested in? And Max responds to Vincent, "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it." And Vincent has already kind of placed who this guy is, and he says, "Oh yeah, you're more of a can-do guy. You do more than talk about it." And this was something I would have missed as a 18-year-old, is that he's calling him out, being like, "That's not who you are. I'm lying to this is clearly trying to get at you," because he knows that he's not a can-do guy.
Yeah,
totally.
It's interesting to see how Max goes from just being like, here's my keys to my car, I'll see you later, which is honestly a pretty I might find myself making a similar deal. I would have said the same thing, but it's interesting how he becomes very disapproving of what Vincent's doing, like how he had this conversation about jazz and just really hit it off how charismatic he was, and then bam, dead. And he realizes he's stuck in a situation where he himself will probably be dead. He has no reason after this night, all the fares are completed. Their clock is ticking against you before he eliminates you. And that urgency is what creates Max to, really gain a spine. Once he sees that his mother is pulled into this, he steals the briefcase with the targets and then goes and throws it over the freeway. And quite honestly, you're thinking Vincent's going to kill him right then and there, but Vincent keeps him alive long enough to try and correct his own mistake on his behalf, which was safer for Vincent to do. But it is interesting to watch this backbone go up because it's desperation. It's when your back's against the wall. People are really great at adapting, but they only really adapt when they absolutely have to. And that's just that's what this pressure pot of a situation is doing for Max. It's making him adapt for his life.
Russell, I don't think you're incorrect. I think it's also more than backed into a corner, must act to get out. I think you would agree that there's also the purposeful conversation of changing who they are in front of the audience's eyes of this job started off was what it was going to be. And throughout the night, the particular things that have happened with these two this night could change, changes them for who they end up being, which I know that you really liked seeing Max's transformation. I do want to ask this question. Do you think anytime during the movie that we get to a point where Vincent would not kill Max at the end of the night?
No.
I think he's
toast. He's been super charming with everybody else he's been on. And the fanning kind of element confirms that this is how he operates. Like you said, this is how he does things. So no, even the first time I watched it, I think the first time I watched it, that was what was sitting there pulling me through the most, was like, how's he going to get out of this? Because he himself will be eliminated in this. And $700 is not nearly enough to have roped you into this, to this mess of $700, you'll be my driver all night long, which sounds pretty good probably initially, but at some point you're just like, oh man, I kicked myself. Like you said, he almost passed up on the cab. He almost missed the fare. He didn't have to accept the $700 I'll be your driver all night long deal either. So there's twice that he could have gotten out of it. I thought it was more of that dark irony thing. To be honest with you, Vincent is a character we've seen before. The sociopath that just doesn't, he's this cold, calculated killer. We've seen this villain before, but it's Max that makes it interesting.
Why does he have to be a sociopath? I know he brings up that, that Max thinks he's a sociopath. Why can't he just be someone who's okay with
I'm actually leaning.
That doesn't automatically.
I'm thinking the same way as you are, Brian.
I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know if that term is appropriate or not. But he clearly does not operate to the similar moral code as most of society or the law.
I get you there, but I'm just saying that I think a lot of people, especially ex-operators, have, you have to come up with a different philosophy when you do this as a profession. And that doesn't automatically lead to you being a sociopath. You may not have the same value for human life that the next person does. But I never got the feeling that Vincent was a sociopath, because if he was, I think there would have been a whole lot more bondage put on Max and a whole lot less life lessons. And why does he bother talking to him when he can just scare the crap out of him, make him drive him around, and then off him? No, he wants to try to fix him in the head, say you have a wrong philosophy in life. I think he's just this antithesis to Max, but has that same quality that Max does that makes him want to better this experience that they're having. I think that they have a lot of the same characteristics. It's just their personalities are very different, and that's where this whole dichotomy piece makes for such a compelling movie.
I don't know.
And I'd say I'm 60-40 on whether or not Max he lets Max live at the end.
Really?
Wow. I think, and I'm definitely leaning towards what Brian's saying here. I think you said a couple things that Russell would agree with, and then some things that go against the sociopath thing. I think that with some of the things that Vincent brings up, could it be all a part of a charismatic deception to have Max believe that he's really interested in what he has to say? And because if that's the case, then you can say that all of his questions about the future are just off-putting until the end of the night. Get me back to the airport before I kill you. I am more along the lines that with what particularly went down that night, that the second half of the movie, we have the potential here that Max survives. Now, some of Vincent's questions. He asks, are you going to call her? Talking about Annie, because he sees the business card.
But she's on his kill list, though.
Well,
I don't think he saw the card in that way, because he had already mentioned earlier, he's like, hey, did you get her phone number? Remember, they have a conversation about his previous fare and everything, so I don't think he necessarily saw the card in terms of being like, oh, that's the name on my...
There's also the possibility that he doesn't have those last two names yet, because he was only looking at the names as they were coming across. It's hard to know exactly what the plans were based on the tablet he was looking at and what gets lost.
Well, real quick though, sorry,
just
for spitting this out here. Doesn't Max pick Vincent up outside of the law office? I guess I just assumed he was doing reconnaissance on her.
Yeah, he does.
Because
he hasn't driven off from having dropped Annie off when he gets Vincent.
I wonder how close that is, because we see Vincent arriving at an airport, and he gets his bag of intel from Jason Statham, airport man. And so then he has to make it from
transported
airport.
It to him.
Yeah.
Did he take the MTA to that station underneath the skyscraper? Because I'm not exactly sure why he's there.
That could have been a thing too.
Because you would think that if there were another cab involved or another way of transportation involved, he might have used that one. I guess I don't think it was a given that Max doesn't survive the night based on the events of this particular night. Had it gone without a hitch, had the first hit not resulted in a body smashing into the top of the cab, I think it goes exactly as Vincent plans, and in the end, Max is dead. He's off.
Why kill Max if Max never knows he's a killer, though? If he just took him to a bunch of places and all Max knows is this guy closed some real estate deals.
You have to clean up your trail, though, when it's all said and done.
And
you can't just...
I don't think
go off
he
of
needs
his word
to.
saying I won't turn you in.
I would agree. I don't think he absolutely has to. It's just mentioned to us in some of the intel from either the FBI guy. No, it was in Fanning's conversation with his other detective saying that this is a lot like that thing that happened in San Francisco, where 3 deaths in a night result, and then in the end there's the cab driver kills himself, or it's made to look like that. Now, we don't know for certain that that's exactly what happened, and that it was Vincent handiwork in the other described case, but I'm thinking that's given to us so that you believe that that's the closest pattern.
Vincent's so controlled of what he's doing. He seems like such a pro. I feel like his interactions with Max feel sloppy. I guess maybe it's his jazz-like tendency to want to improvise, but I mean, I think he sticks with Max, perhaps testing him as a driver even beforehand and testing him with the money stuff and just seeing how he reacts. I think Vincent has at least selected him before he gets into things with him, because I believe he thinks he can control him. And he can at first. But as Max's character evolves, he becomes somebody who won't be controlled by Vincent. Vincent's a wolf, Max is a sheep. But later on, that wolf-like tendency was within Max and it comes out. I mean, turns out, it took the fact that he knew the person that Vincent was going after, and he, was quite infatuated with her, and, she basically told him to call her and stuff like that. So, he's seen the destruction, and he has the guilt on him that he has to do something. I can't live with myself to not do something. And furthermore, I've been pushed to this new limit of I have all these things that I didn't think that I could do. I didn't think I could go into a room full of gangsters at gunpoint and negotiate them to give me a list of people to be killed and then go back into the car. He's come out of this night different.
No, that's interesting. He's about to get handcuffed because there's still the body in the trunk. And that's when every choice after that is extremely dangerous and hard to do for a normal person. Flings the cop over his shoulder, takes the pistol. I find, and don't you find that there's a mixture of mimicking Vincent's words and actions, and then also like the fire rising inside of himself, of like being able to do these things, and then running to the skyscraper, calling Annie with just the right information. He jacks that dude's cell phone, and points the gun at him. By the way, all these things are like result in an action scene at the end of the movie that I actually wasn't really expecting. That the tone is like slightly different in like survival game of these actors, because everybody else that's going to get offed in this movie is just a target that you don't really know much about.
So it's interesting. We covered a movie that you were on, Dustin, earlier this year, who had a somewhat remorseless contract killer in it with No Country for Old Men. How do you think that Anton, which by the way, Javier Bardem is that character, Anton, in No Country for Old Men, and he's in this movie too, a smaller part, but just a fun connection. But how do you feel like Vincent compares to Anton, like this cold killer? I mean, obviously Anton doesn't waste time; he's killing everybody in his path. I think it's interesting to see that Vincent, like you said, almost enjoys the company as he's going along with this. He's spilling out his past. He talks about, he mentions that his father didn't give him a very happy upbringing. He talks about his philosophy on why he views how he views the world. I mean, a contract killer doesn't have to explain these things to people, but it's like he almost wants just the companionship throughout the night.
I think there's an interesting thing here, which is that initially you had said like, oh, this guy's a sociopathic killer. We can say that about Anton Chigurh. That we know from covering the movie and just kind of what we've learned from it. He's creepy and scary. Vincent, aside from killing, is charming and kind of fun to be around. The conversations between Max and Vincent are pretty cool. The conversations between Vincent and anybody else in the movie, they are made menacing because you know what Vincent is, but if you didn't know what he was, he'd be just a fine gentleman the way that he's talking with Ida, Max's mom. It almost seems as if a desire to improvise, I think you may have mentioned, or maybe he's done this for a while. And so, how do you make this job fun for you? How do you make this what you want to do with your time? I don't know, but I'd say that he probably could do this alone. He could rent a car or have his summer intern do it, like you mentioned. He could do that alone, but it's almost better to do it his way, which is with an unwitting partner.
Maybe so. By the way, is Jamie Foxx, Bryan, a supporting actor? He gets nominated for Best Supporting Actor a lot. How is he not the main actor to everybody else? Am I off base here?
I would say this is a co-lead situation. Yeah. I would say that Tom Cruise is the kind of guy that more or less demands a first billing. Just as part of
for
his,
sure, he's
his
first
deal.
billed.
So
he's first billed.
I would say that either of them, in my opinion, could have gotten supporting actor chops, as I don't think either of them stand out in this as a best leading actor in a movie sort of quality. But to answer your question before, I wanted to jump in on the No Country piece. I think that is probably why the No Country comparison is probably why I don't think Tom Cruise is a sociopath.
Right.
Because you get to see what sociopaths, like there's a very marked difference between the two characters. And yeah, that's why it's just a job for him. And does he have a diminished respect for human life? 100%, but it doesn't make him a sociopath.
Interesting.
It's a difference between Woody Harrelson and Javier in No Country. Like, that's like Woody Harrelson is the Tom Cruise character.
Okay, no, that's another fair point to bring up. Yeah, I had tinges of Jake Gyllenhaal's character from Nightcrawler as well.
Sure,
like he's incredibly charming until it's time. He's also incredibly ruthless.
I spent about 2 minutes after you had mentioned Jason Statham in the beginning of this, thinking, how cool would it be if they made this all one universe?
Right.
Like, that'd be awesome if that really was Transporter Jason Statham, and that was like just his first appearance in a movie, and that continues on to all be within the same stratosphere.
Yeah.
But swinging back around, Jamie Foxx has the most lines, the most camera time. He's the protagonist character. I mean, you can say that Tom Cruise is going to have a higher billing just based on clout, but still, this is Jamie Foxx is the lead actor, is he not?
No, he is. To me, he is.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
I think the story is more revolved around. You mentioned it first, but it's the thing I took away. What was his change from how he starts to how he ends is very much what this movie is about. And so totally, he's my lead actor. And while Tom Cruise can be top billed, I think his character, who he is in the movie, is meant to support and be there to affect and change who Max is and how Max operates. I would say this is Max's story, though it's very much driven by Vincent's job.
Oh yeah, he's the straw that stirs the drink for sure. Vincent is. Like, he makes things happen to Max, for sure. It's interesting, though. Michael Mann told Cruise that Vincent is a man who's able to get in and out of anywhere without anyone recognizing or remembering him. And in order to prepare for the movie, Cruise would make FedEx deliveries on the ground in Los Angeles without anybody recognizing him. It's kind of a fun game to play, but there's something very striking about his presentation that stands out a ton. And if blending in is what he's going for, I mean, it doesn't seem like that's what's happening. I found myself often thinking that, like, this guy kind of stands out. Maybe it's just because it's Tom Cruise.
The first time I saw this movie, or the first time I really, thought about this movie, I remember thinking, salt and pepper's here. Salt, salt, salt.
And in the world of Tom Cruise hair, on one end of the spectrum, you've got Legend, which we covered. He had great hair in that one. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got Born on the Fourth, which we covered, and that's bad. Like, that's very bad Tom Cruise hair. Where is this on the spectrum, Dustin?
I would say it definitely draws your eye. For the first time viewer, it could probably I think I agree with you that it could be a distraction.
Right, I know it's Tom Cruise. Again, another regular no-name actor wouldn't have this problem, but I did have this problem. I was kind of like, his face looks awfully young for that hair. It doesn't make sense. So, anyway,
we had a group of guys at work. All of us were bald or balding, and it basically looked like we were 3 generations of the same person. And we used to we used to play this game with customers called That Hairstyle or Bald. And I got to tell you, I would take this Tom Cruise hairstyle over bald. Like, it's not even a question. Oh, yeah. I actually think that this is what my hair would actually look like right now if I weren't bald, because almost everything on the sides is gray now.
Is Tom Cruise overdoing it as an actor in this movie? He does, in my opinion, he overdoes it a lot. It's a complaint I have about Tom Cruise. And, I think he's doing it again here. Just throwing that out there.
I think he had fun with the part. Like, I just think that this was a part that was fairly different. He rarely plays a bad guy, and
that's true.
I think he was enjoying himself, and I think that enjoyment of playing something fairly atypical that he doesn't normally do is why it seemed maybe contrived for you.
I'd like to volley back and forth with moments where you think he's overdoing it, or moments that maybe stand out as cool, but do they teeter on overdoing it? I'll give you mine. I'll give you my first movement, and then I'll volley it over to you. which is that like the discussion about Miles Davis and jazz, like that scene, I felt like it was a little over the top. And I've actually, before rewatching it for this, had disliked all of that, especially Vincent's like apparently expert knowledge of this jazz great compared to Daniel, the one who owns a jazz bar. I thought that was over the top.
Yeah. I think some of the cab discussions with the philosophy thing, I think Jamie Foxx is like, I think the tone and stuff that he's setting, I think there's an intensity in him that is not appropriate for the level of conversation that they're having. There's something about Vincent's character that is used to what he's doing, and he seems too wound up about it in talking to Max. So it's almost like well, you keep talking about like, hey, there's so many billions of people on the planet, it's just one life kind of thing. It's actually more convincing, more chilling. Subtlety is not Tom Cruise's thing.
I don't think the dialogue choices or the writers help in that aspect. I didn't much care for that either. But I'm gonna chalk that one up to whoever chose to write his lines as opposed to his performance of those lines. I think it's the lines I like least. Let's talk about another potential over the top thing before, because I don't want to be mired down in it, is the busy scene in the club. He gets physical, hand-to-hand combat with a couple guards. One thing we know Tom Cruise can do well, and very well. I thought that was awesome. But there's one time where like he stomps out a guard that has fallen to the ground, like he stomps on him really hard. And the primal viciousness in his face as he does it seems like, whoa, that doesn't seem like Vincent. Vincent seems like he would do the job and like move on, that he wouldn't bring emotion to that particular move.
Exactly. A high intensity. Yes.
Yeah.
He does this verbally. He does this with his body language, and he does these acting choices in action moments. These are all things that I mean, it's just a congruent thing across the board. He's an intense guy, you know? I mean, he jumps on Oprah's couch. He's an intense person. He's intensely happy. He's intensely charming to people. It is Tom Cruise. I don't think he can dial it down. That's all I'm saying.
This was within a couple years of that jumping on Oprah's couch thing anyway. Like, it was in that time period.
I think that if I were going to make a rationale for the change in Vincent's behavior from, you know, smooth criminal to more vicious, if I were him, I'd be pretty annoyed at this point. Not just at Max, but also with myself for letting it get to this. I think that when he entered this whole situation with Max in the cab, you know, you have a guy who's supremely confident that he can control all variables of a situation. Dude falls out a window. That's, you know, strike one. Briefcase gets chucked over, you know, loses all of his intel. Strike two. All of a sudden you've got, he's got to send Max in to get the backup disc. I feel like he's probably just really ticked off in general for a variety of different reasons at this point. And you know what? If you know how to hurt somebody and you're pissed off, then yeah, man, stomp on a knee. I think that's just the natural, the escalation that happens is, I want to get this over with. This is already more than I bargained for, whether it's my fault or otherwise. Like, I'm done. So,
I can see that.
He took the gloves off at that point and said, this isn't, surgical any longer. Plus he was going to have to shoot this guy in front of a bunch of heavily armed bodyguards anyway. So why do that with a bunch of bouncers at your back? He neutralizes what he needs to for a clean exit.
So some fun alternate castings here include Edward Norton has offered both lead roles of Max and Vincent, and Leonardo DiCaprio was considered for the role of Vincent, but he was too busy shooting The Aviator, which came out this year. And Colin Farrell was considered. I particularly dislike that choice. John Travolta was another
like Colin Farrell for Fanning.
I just don't think I don't want him in this movie. But
well, that's fine too.
Adam Sandler was considered for Max, which at first I thought, no, that's terrible. But I did start chewing on it. I was like, oh, you know what? Sometimes he does leave maybe that nervous, stressed out thing could maybe, it's not as insane as I first thought it was, but Jamie Foxx is awesome in this. Yeah, Johnny Depp was also considered for the role of Max.
Jabba Jabba, thinking about a limo service. Jabba doo, limo.
It's gonna be a club experience. And this is like,
does Depp make you any happier in the role of Max?
No, I don't like that either. Although I see kind of him in The Tourist, and I can see where that could be a feasible thing for him. I found Jamie Foxx Jamie Foxx was like the girl in the 90s rom-com movie where, if you put these glasses on, we're going to believe that you're a sheep. Right. But as soon as you take the glasses off, you're the hot girl. That was what Jamie Foxx was to me in this film. I'm like, he's in great shape. He looks like a guy that could handle himself. And you're trying to play him off as this, quiet.
They put a very baggy shirt on him and a very baggy hoodie to try and hide really his amazing quiet, physique.
I'm just this happy-go-lucky cab driver with a business plan. That was the least believable part of this to me. So I almost think you need someone a little bit more, anemic and a little bit more sheepish in the role than Jamie Foxx. Or at least someone who kind of looks like
They shoot him behind a wheel so much and they shoot him at his face a lot. They do downplay the fact that this guy is in very good shape. And
much bigger than Tom Cruise. Like, Jamie Foxx is enormous compared to Tom Cruise.
Yeah, they should have called Jamie Sheep. So I think the thing is, could Jamie Foxx do this role in the stardom that he has today? No. But as you mentioned, this was before Ray.
Sure.
So I think it might have made more sense to the us of 2004 than the us of right now. But yeah, I mean, even in the description in the movie, they say like, oh yeah, we're looking for like medium build. I think they do dress him down. That was something I was going to mention later, but they dress him down well. So I think there's not movie magic here, but there's an effort to make him seem as if he's a schlub.
A regular guy. Yeah. I buy him more being a regular guy than I buy Mark Ruffalo being this like super tough cop guy.
Do you want to talk about Mark Ruffalo as Fanning, or as the character or the actor at all? What do you think about his arc in this movie? I feel like his arc is important, but is his character?
It's funny upon rewatching this, I didn't even remember Mark Ruffalo being in it, or maybe I just didn't know who Mark Ruffalo was back then. And I wasn't actually paying attention when he first shows up at that apartment until I hear him talk. And like my head swung up and I was like, is that Mark Ruffalo? Because I'm actually a big Mark Ruffalo fan now, post.
Now, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my God, that's Mark Ruffalo. So a couple things that coming back to this now as opposed to 2004 is I didn't know who Jason Statham was in 2004. I didn't know who Mark Ruffalo was in 2004, and I didn't know who Javier Bardem was in 2004. So watching this after the fact, I'm like,
whoa!
Well, Hidden Gem is stacked in this film. Like, a lot. It's heavy. Like, there are so many A-list actors in this that weren't then, and now I'm like, oh man, they got a deal on actors on this. I don't know what they had to pay those three, but man,
I think it's Michael Mann.
The inflation,
Michael Mann.
The inflation on what those salaries would look like if you had to make this movie again right now, it would be astronomical.
Here's an interesting one that's going to hurt you, Frye. Val Kilmer was actually cast in this role that we're talking about right now as Fanning.
I like that.
He pulled out before filming began due to conflicts, and Alexander was taking more time to make, and so Alexander took Val Kilmer away from a bad movie, pulling him out of this movie, and
he was only in that movie for like 5 minutes too. Well, I guess it was more like 25 minutes since everything in that movie was pulled out as long as it possibly could have been. But I'm
not sure how long Ruffalo was needed on sets for all these things. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
He's not in it that much.
Right.
So I think we're only talking about it at this length right now because it's Mark Ruffalo.
Right. I think my only qualification that I would say to Mark Ruffalo being in this movie is he actually may have the worst hair in the film.
No, it's important to have both highlights and lowlights, and his hair, and facial hair, like his whole look.
Yeah, his look was the worst.
His wardrobe was by far the worst.
By far the worst. So
Now, we talked about some preparation. Mark Ruffalo underwent rigorous weapons training. I'm not sure why. Again, he's not in the movie that much, but in attempts to feel like he matters too. He really took it to heart and went into that. Tom Cruise did do a lot of this as well. In order to train for action sequences, he fired live rounds. Michael Mann himself trained with various weapons with him, and he knew how to direct action film sequences in full effect from his other work and stuff in Mission Impossible. So if you read about Tom Cruise in any of his movies, he takes everything to heart. And so, Michael Mann and Jamie Foxx are preparing for this the car chase sequences by racing old cars at Willow Springs Raceway in the Mojave Desert. It sounds like Michael Mann just wanted to hang out with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx and do fun things, go shoot guns and drive cars fast.
Why not?
I mean, if that's part of your work budget, like I'm 100% doing that. If they said, Bryan, we really need you to immerse yourself in this new book series coming out, and you've got to learn how to shoot guns and race cars to do it, I'd be like,
Sure. Man, you just nailed like two. I was gonna say, add one more on there to do some skiing at exotic locations.
Right,
Bryan's trifecta.
I'll shoot guns while I'm skiing. Man.
Yeah, just so you know, the ski slope ends at like an artisan craft brewery that only produces 1 ton of alcohol.
And now you have a connection.
None of
Dustin.
their beers are IPAs.
So you have
and their whole menu consists of everything but IPAs.
There you go. Yes. Yeah.
Australian screenwriter Stuart Beatty was only 17 when he took a cab home from the Sydney airport, and it was on that ride that he had this idea of a homicidal maniac sitting in the back of a cab with the driver nonchalantly entering a conversation with him and entrusting this passenger implicitly, and then Beatty drafted his idea into a 2-page treatment, and he enrolled in Oregon State University. He fleshed out his idea for his first screenplay, and he titled it The Last Domino. He put the script away for quite some time, and taking it out occasionally here and there to revise and to make rewrites for following years. Frank Darabont, who we covered with The Shawshank Redemption and The Mist, wrote a draft of the screenplay in 2000, and then once Michael Mann was attached as the director, there's a substantial rewrite on this. It's interesting to see that this work was done and conceived of by somebody so young, and how it's one of those things that they kind of like pull it out every now and again and just kind of work on it. I thought that was an interesting part of the notion of how this thing got made.
I think that's potentially why you had kind of, I don't want to harp on it too long, but it had to change. He's not a homicidal maniac. I would watch that movie too. I would totally watch the movie of where it's more focused on the conversation between somebody truly unstable in the backseat and a mystery unraveling. That sounds great too. But hey, good for this guy to focus on an idea and not have his script become Island Limos, something that's never going to happen. And just like it comes back to it, and I think I didn't pick this movie for us to cover because it's a favorite. I picked it because I had seen it a lot as a kid, and this opportunity to look at it again has really shown there's a lot more going on here. So
there is something to, I was gonna say, I was surprised. I honestly had forgotten many parts of this movie. I forgot far more than that Mark Ruffalo was in it. I forgot a lot of things, and so it was a fun one to study.
I forgot it was Jada Pinkett Smith. When I introduced the movie,
I did not forget that.
I said Tandy Newton. I thought it was Tandy Newton, but
I honestly enjoyed their scene so much in the beginning. I was kind of like, no, don't let her get out of the cab yet. I enjoy what's going on there. I want a different movie where Jamie Lee Foxx, with Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Lee Foxx. You guys just got so many different actors and actresses blended into one name, right?
I don't know why I did that.
You got Vivica Fox, Jamie Lee Curtis. I mean,
Jamie Foxx would be driving around Jada Pinkett Smith. Sorry, the 3 names from the second actor with the very simple 2 names of the first actor got me messed up there. But I was
Thomas
enjoying
Hayden Fox.
I was enjoying watching them drive around.
Sorry.
I liked watching Annie and Max drive around on their own, and it was short-lived. And I actually thought that chemistry was good.
And what you get is a little taste of that exact thing that Max wants is by the time you're done with Island limos, you don't want to get out of the limo. And she didn't want to get out of the car. And I think there's aside from the main plot of this movie, that little shared connection at the beginning, and Jamie Foxx's acting of a guy who just in a world of fleeting moments, when like he just kind of had a connection with this smoke show of a fare that he like reverses in the airport lot to go and get. Like small talk can turn into nothing, and 99% of the time it turns into nothing. But she came back and knocked on his window. He's sitting there like kicking himself. He's scoffing and exhaling, like, man, why didn't I do like that? It's great, and I think it's just enough of a connection to make that scene matter later. Without it, it's a rescue. It's not like a rescue for love. It's a rescue for connection. It was all we needed in terms of like romanticism.
It was good. This movie, going back to the creation though, it sat on the DreamWorks development books for 3 years, and it was initially passed through a couple of different directors. And Russell Crowe was interested in playing Vincent as a hitman, and the project started generating momentum at that point. And Crowe brought Michael Mann on board, and so it could have easily been Crowe here on this project. And Mann went to Tom Cruise later with the idea of playing the hitman. Crowe had another project called Eucalyptus with Nicole Kidman. That didn't work out so well for him. He probably should have stuck in here. But it's interesting. We almost didn't have Cruise. We almost had Russell Crowe instead. Really, like, close.
Do you think casting Tom Cruise here is part of the draw for why? Because I didn't know it was as successful as it was until you read the numbers earlier.
Yeah, if Tom Cruise is in a movie, people just show up. I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Yeah, I think it was likely a fun choice for him too. I don't know if I love the idea of Russell Crowe doing it, but I'm normally not disappointed with him. So that could have been fun.
Yeah, and Michael Mann was hired. Spike Lee, Martin Scorsese, and Steven Spielberg were all offered chances at directing this movie, and Lee showed interest in passing on the offer. But it's interesting though. Michael Mann also not necessarily the first choice. Tom Cruise not the first choice. This project was nobody's first choice. It doesn't feel. I'm wondering why it was so passed over. I feel like there's something interesting here, but maybe at a first glance it felt like what I thought it was too. It felt like a Jason Statham movie when you read the synopsis of just, hitman in the back of the car overtakes this cab driver and it's one crazy night. Like that sounds like a B action movie, in fairness, and maybe that's why it wasn't taken more seriously by more of these people.
I think that this movie falls into one of those wonderful categories that I love most, where you see something, you either do or you hear nothing about it because people just didn't, or B, you hear bad things because people said bad things without having seen it. And this gets to, go in that holster of movies. You can be like, hey, let's watch this. And you're more than likely going to get a, wow, thanks for, recommending this. It was a lot better than I thought it would be, which I live on that. So I think that you can have movies that fall under the radar after the fact, which I don't think you can really call this as under the radar during that time because it was bumped up next to The Aviator. So it made enough money, it got enough hype, it got enough, I guess, recognition at the time. But I do think this got just forgotten about nearly immediately after that year ended.
Yeah, I think so too. And maybe just, like I said, Fox's own other performances covered over it. I don't know. And Michael Mann said that resonated with him because his own father was a cab driver. And when Max and Vincent are driving to Club Fever, there's a coyote that crosses the road in front of them. I thought that they made a real big moment out of that. And I didn't get what that was. And upon digging into this further, apparently American Navajos have an omen that it's considered to be like a taboo. If you see a coyote crossing your path, you should turn back on your journey because something terrible will happen to you. Audioslave was playing. It was a very profound, big moment in the movie. I don't know that I got it the first time, and without studying it, I don't think I would have gotten it this time either. Am I dense, or did that just connect home for everybody else?
I think it was just an opportunity to be artistic. I think that's kind of all it was. It is in a movie with a cool soundtrack, a soundtrack that I laud, and I don't always laud compilation soundtracks. They come back to that Audioslave song twice, which is the only song they do that with. I just think it was it's a known thing in LA that there's coyotes about, like that's particularly late at night. I think sometimes you've asked before, like, does this feel like a Boston movie? Does this feel like a New York movie? Well, this feels like an LA movie.
It does.
And the empty streets, a lot of the top-down driving scenes, and then just like, hey, there's a coyote in the road. And it being like a moment of introspection for them both. I don't know if it's after the third or before the third or after the fourth. I guess it'd have to be after the third, but sometime in between those two is when that happens. And I think it was just an odd, in this case, moment of silence when they're both in the car and not talking. Because usually they are talking to one another, either through panic from Max or waxing philosophical from Vincent. That this was just a moment where, okay, they're catching their breath before the next thing happens.
Is this the thing before Jamie Foxx ends up driving the car at reckless speeds and then flipping the car? Is this the thing is this the light switch going off? Has he found his wolf inside of him, maybe? Am I getting things out of order?
Okay, so it's in the right order. It's the proximity in time. I think that this is happening after they leave Club Fever. So
yeah, he's got all he's like hit this new level of swagger that he's never had before.
Yeah. So I believe that we are in between 4 and 5. I don't think it happens immediately. I think there's a little bit of time, not much. I think that's the right location though.
Yeah, I found myself thinking it's a really big creative, big symbolic moment, and this movie doesn't do that anywhere else. And both with the soundtrack and with that, I found myself going like, do I like this? Is it out of character for the movie, or is it so important? Like, this is the moment where he finds his wolf inside of him. Or is it just, like, hey, bad things are about to happen? And I find myself unsure of what to do with this moment.
Right,
and it may even affect how I feel about this movie, but I'm not sure I've rested down on whether I like this movie or not.
I think this is it. I know that it's not imperative we get it right, but I had written down earlier that the song combo moving from Audioslave, Chris Cornell's awesome vocals on Shadow on the Sun.
Good vocals, by the way.
To the Korean mix of Ready, Steady, Go by Paul Oakenfold, Inside the Club. So the first time you hear that song, which is, I believe, when you see the coyote, is before they go into Club Fever, because the soundtrack and the way the movie goes is Audioslave directly into Paul Oakenfold. Then they revisit the Audioslave song after they leave Fever. That's not when the coyote happens. It goes coyote, Club Fever, fourth target, revisit the song, driving super fast into the car crash. So it's close, but
interesting.
That's the order.
Okay. So he's about to find his wolf then. Yeah, okay. Oh, okay.
Well, speaking of finding his wolf, I know you mentioned it before, but the scene with Javier Bardem, whose name is Felix, and he's got the double Mexican hyphenated last name, which I cannot remember right now, but that scene where he really does find his spine, like you mentioned, is such a huge payoff. After watching this meek character for an hour, then I think what you said, he says something along like, you need to tell that guy behind me to put his gun away before I take it from him and beat his ass with it, or something like that.
Yeah, he stumbles before that point for sure.
But huge payoff to see him because he's almost embodying Vincent. He's even using some of his lines. It's very, very cool to see that.
It's Mann apparently is this very meticulous guy who has people do so many takes in the movie, the massive number of takes apparently. And Mark Ruffalo said that the scene where Fanning first discovers Ramon's disappearance and proceeds to call the other detectives in, Mann insisted on 80 takes for Ruffalo, saying that you begin to lose it at that point. And Foxx confirmed that he really did do a lot of takes on that one. And he's like, that hurts. It hurts. It's interesting. We've sometimes seen people like Clint Eastwood as a director who can do it so quickly, and then there's the converse, where somebody like Kubrick or Mann does it so many times. I have wondered, he's clearly going to get what he wants out of this, but I find it very compelling when somebody is that controlled, where they're not necessarily letting these big good actors find the character and to trust them. I find it one of those. It seems torturous to be a director who's quite like, no, do it again 80 times.
Well, especially for something that really matters very little to the success of this movie.
Exactly. So,
well, and he was lucky though. He was lucky with Tom Cruise's practice with the firearms. He was able to get those 5 shots when he takes down the 2 guys who stick up, who take the money from and the bag from Jamie Foxx. He pulls his pistol out and gets 5 shots in 1.4 seconds, which beats the projected time of 1.6 seconds they were supposed to shoot it in. So all of Tom Cruise's intensity and training paid off with like, look, all right, you want to see how this is done? Bam, 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 bam. It was insane.
And Frye, what do you think about the Michael Mann as a director here? Like, this is totally in his wheelhouse. This is like, Thief, Heat, Insider. Like, this is, Miami Vice. Like, these are all things that Michael Mann has done up to this point that makes sense. Not so much Last of the Mohicans, but I mean, do you like this? This just feels like straight down the line. Like, if you like Michael Mann, this is going to make you happy.
I like his use of darkness in his films. Like, they're typically grittier films, and I like that, especially from like a heist, law, assassin, whatever you want to clap to it. So yeah, I would say I'm a fan. I don't think it's something that you could. I don't know if I would go on like a Michael Mann run where all I do is just marathon his films. But I'm never like, oh, it's a Michael Mann film, I'm not going to see it. And I don't think
they're kind of like slower paced. All of those movies that I just named.
He does.
None of them are roller coaster rides. Dustin said this movie finishes out kind of exciting, but it's like an hour and 40 minutes before. I don't know. I'm not so sure it is like it never hits that high pace.
I'd agree with that. It's more, you're right. I mean, this Heat is definitely a slow burn. This one was a slow burn.
What do you say, guys? Why don't we hand out some awards here?
Let's go.
Sounds great.
All right. Dustin, who's your MVP?
I had already said that I felt like this was this is Max's story. And I think Jamie Foxx, aside from just the trick of take the glasses off and she's hot, I think he plays the meek character well. He plays the interaction with Annie well. He plays the fear of Vincent and then coming around into who he is eventually. He even holds a gun like he's never held a gun before, which for Max is true. So I think he's my MVP here.
Yeah, it's a great choice. Bryan, MVP.
I think that I would probably give it to the director on this one. I love the story behind this film's creation. And either the director with Michael Mann or the scriptwriter, it's a cool idea. I really got behind it. I remember thinking at the time, this is a really odd way of making a film like this, and I think that's where it gives its opportunities for the artistic shots that you see from Michael Mann. So it's a very symbiotic relationship that really benefited behind the camera instead of in front of it.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with Dustin on this one. I'm going to go with Jamie Foxx. I think 2004 was a very good year for Jamie Foxx, and as an actor, I think he does a lot of the heavy lifting for the experience of this movie. And I think if you get somebody who's not as good at it as he is, the movie's significantly worse for it. Anyway, best supporting actor, Dustin.
This almost doesn't feel right, but I'm going to go with Tom Cruise here to be first billed and be best supporting. Yeah, he's over the top, but I think it's a real treat to see him not do his normal thing. I think if you were to find this on a streaming service, you're going to see a picture of Tom Cruise's face with his gray hair and his stubbly beard, and you're going to say, oh, that's odd, and it might just make you click on it.
Okay, yeah. Bryan, best supporting.
I went with Tom Cruise on this one, too, just because it was so off his kind of normal path, being a villain, and, it's not that he can't, play that smooth criminal or anything. It's just that you rarely get to see it in this way. He usually likes to wear the white hat in a different way instead of a gray suit. So, yeah, I'm going with Tom.
Yeah, I'm with Jada Pinkett Smith on this one. She her chemistry in that cab was really good, and I thought that she played her part so well. So I wish she had been in the movie more. Hidden gem, Dustin.
During that scene where Jada Pinkett Smith and Jamie Foxx are talking about like the music, she says, "Will you turn that up?" He goes, "Oh, you're a fan of the classics." She's like, "Yeah." They're playing this kind of like R&B blues song, kind of an older sounding song. Well, that song isn't old. It was recorded 2 years prior. It is just using the vocals of a very old singer named Richie Havens, who was the opening act of Woodstock. So I thought it was very fun that they were like, "Oh, you like the classic songs, don't you?" It's like, this song came out on the album like while you're shooting it. It's not a classic song. So that's my hidden gem.
Yeah, that's nice. Bryan, hidden gem.
I did go with Jason Statham just because he occupied my brain so much during this rewatch for this podcast. For the reasons I told you already, I was like, yeah, and even his attitude when he bumps into Tom Cruise, accidentally winks, even his attitude, I'm like, I was a very transporter of him. Like, So I don't know. I can see it.
Mine's going to be Bruce McGill, the guy who plays Pedrosa. He has a gruffness that I thought was really good for the role.
Is Pedrosa the FBI agent?
Yeah.
Okay, that's sorry. Just Pedrosa didn't ring out to me, but that's what I thought it was.
Yeah, I love him in Legend of Bagger Vance.
Yeah, I feel like I like him a lot. Like he gets a small role and something's memorable about him.
He's a fun guy.
I mean, yeah. Recast. If you had to recast somebody and put somebody else in their place, Dustin, who would it be?
I had a feeling they wanted. Now you talked about who they actually could have cast, but I would have loved Ray Fanning's role to be a Latino role. I think they wanted it to be. I think they tried to make him look like he was. So I think they should have gone.
Doesn't work for him, that's for sure.
It doesn't work for him. They must have just seen the last name. They didn't know him yet. Like Ruffalo. Okay, let's go with this guy. So I think Michael Pena would have been awesome as Fanning here. I think we need to change Fanning's character regardless. But I would have liked him. I think he played a cool role right around this time in the Wahlberg movie Shooter. And I think that was probably shooting at the same time.
He was actually an FBI agent in that.
There we go. So I think Michael Pena in this would be fun.
It's a pretty safe change. I think that role's ripe for the picking. Bryan, where are you going for your recast?
I'm going with Jamie Foxx. I really do think that I had a good time with it. I'd like to see a guy like Chiwetel Ejiofor play this role because I feel like he is. Like, he's played, BA roles. He's been, that boss guy. But I think he also maybe plays a little meeker, easier too. So, or maybe it's that he can have that look of, maybe a nerdier, quieter guy, but then also I've seen him bring it. And because he's had both those sets of work, I can see the character change move a little more smoothly. Because really, with Jamie Foxx's action movie work, I mean, I'm picturing things like The Kingdom and stuff, where I'm just like, I can't buy him this meek.
My recast is going to be Tom Cruise, and I had a hard time picking between this. I was going between De Niro and Walken. I think you should have an older actor doing this. I think you should have somebody who's seen the world and is hardened by the world around them, and has this kind of nihilistic kind of view on things. And so I think I want Walken here, but I went a whole nother direction with this. I don't think I get as many tickets sold. Tom Cruise is clearly a better choice if you want to sell tickets, but I think the role would do better with somebody like that.
I think neither Walken nor De Niro could do the club scene or the chasing, the running, because Tom Cruise is an animal when it comes to aerobic exercise and movement.
He is.
Like could you get an older guy that is still spry? I don't know. Nobody runs like Tom Cruise on camera.
Like a Minority Report, man. Everybody runs.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know. I felt like
I like your idea though, because I thinking of Walken as menacing in that way could be a lot of fun.
I think it could turn on the charm in a very organic way too.
I love Seven Psychopaths.
I think it's potentially just a different movie. You have Walken as an aging assassin and just not have him in this movie. I'd watch it. Promise you.
Yeah. All right. So, best shot, Dustin.
This was actually hard. I was trying to think of what stands out on a rewatch of a movie. I've seen a whole bunch, and I'm going to go with the dark shots inside the skyscraper at the end of the movie with the LA skyline behind it. And you have some music, but you also have some silence so that you can hear Jada Pinkett Smith's Annie like breathing hard and like the sound of her stockings against the floor. Like I thought that was like very cinematically like taking, and but like I think the focus on the faces and with the skyline in the background was really cool. Something I didn't remember from my earlier watches.
This movie's nominated for cinematography. I believe it flexes itself in that part of the movie too. So Brian, what about you?
My best shot is the coyote scene. I actually was holding off on bringing up Audio Slave because it's like I have grown to appreciate. I was already a Soundgarden fan when this came out, and Audio Slave was on their first album. So it's probably my favorite part of the movie is just that, with the city flashing by and the soundtrack. So
yeah, I think I'm gonna go with where Dustin was. I don't like the dark filming of this movie as much as I think critics and people liked it. I think it actually made me have a hard time putting my arms around it at first, but upon revisiting it, there's parts of it that are to be appreciated. So there's some technical things about it I do like. But on the other hand, aesthetically, I felt like Mann's pace of this movie paired with that dark, those filters and things like that, there was something that made me have a hard time coming to this movie initially as a casual viewer. And I think some of that has to go with it too. So maybe it just wasn't a very sophisticated movie watcher in 2004, but I can at least appreciate it more now. But the tower shots as well, like when Annie's like with the green screen city behind them.
Oh, really? That was yours too? Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was. Best scene, Dustin.
It wasn't this when I was growing up, but it is now. It's when Max makes his turn. It's when he finds his spine, like you said, and he's talking to Felix, maybe the most dangerous man in LA. And he's pulling lines. He even, I think he ends that conversation with something like in 6 years, have I ever let you down? Like he's improvising. And I really don't want to focus on the stuff from Jazz earlier, but what he turns into is pretty cool. And I'm glad that we have an entire scene devoted to it. So that's mine.
Yeah. Brian, best scene.
I like the chase. Basically everything from Jamie Foxx getting Jada to running down through the metro, the cat and mouse game there. I think that whole chase scene was awesome.
Yeah. And I'm going to go with the flipping of the car. When Jamie Foxx has had it, and he might even be throwing his own life on the line, but his own life's probably going to get taken from him anyway. So it's the moment of throwing caution to the wind. I'm going to flip my cab, throw this thing on its head. I threw your briefcase over. That wasn't enough. This is an escalation again of like, I am taking back control, and it's kind of a triumphant moment. Works out for him in the end. And to me, it's a good filmed scene too. It's funny they got it in one take, but then they flipped 3 more cars, kind of needlessly anyway, and they ended up keeping the first take. Kind of funny.
It's fun.
That's my favorite. I was gonna say,
not
Michael Mann.
needlessly.
It's a serious movie, but I'll be honest with you. I think like reading some of these things beyond Michael Mann making people do things over and over and over again. It did make me sit there and go like, it sounds like he's having a lot of fun hanging out with his actors in this movie. It's just like, I think that's pretty good, but we have 3 more cars to flip, so let's flip them. We talked a lot about wardrobe in this one. Dustin, best wardrobe. Make a moment.
I think it's important to recognize a good dressing down, which is what they do with Jamie Foxx. He's wearing a T-shirt that's made out of a material underneath a baggy hoodie. It's kind of a crossed V-neck If you look back at it, it almost looks like he's wearing 2 V-necks. It looks like a cheap shirt that like you might find at the donation center. And like makes sense. You think of him eating that messy sandwich, he probably comes home like it's stained a little bit. I think the gold standard for dressing down a beautiful actress is Charlize Theron in Monster. But this dressing down, like to make him seem just like a meek guy, it was perfect. So that's my take on best wardrobe here.
Yeah. Brian, best wardrobe.
I mean, it's got to be the gray suit. Like that.
The monochromatic.
I don't think I've ever seen like the hair match the suit better than it did in this. And I felt like it was like all of it was just so purpose driven. And it's a weird color combo. Like it's not, you can't even say like black hat versus white hat. You've just got this like silver fox thing going on. I don't even know how to describe it. It was weird.
There's something very wolf-like about it.
And here it's super unique. Like this doesn't, I can't point to any other movie I've seen where I'm like, yep, just like this other thing. No, I mean, they did something different.
I'm with you on the suit, by the way. I mean, I questioned the hair choice. I mean, but given that was the choice they made, the suit was very part of it. And so like the slightly darker gray tie with the all monochrome gray suit. Something about hitmen is romanticized. I think if you did want to be a hitman, like when I make contract kills, I try and blend in a little bit more. So I mean, there's no way this man is blending in like this. I mean, it's not just because he's Tom Cruise. I mean, he's very sharply dressed. I mean, it's a very nice custom. That's not a Macy's suit. It fits him perfectly. And so to Brian's point, like this man has no color. Like, you know, there's a coldness to him. It's very wolf-like. He's very gray. And like, I mean, I felt like there's so many things about that personified his character. And that's what, I think this movie is really good for wardrobe. I think all three of the main characters with Jada Pinkett Smith, Jimmy Foxx, and Tom Cruise, I felt like they nailed it. The wardrobe says so much about each of the characters.
I think they did nail it, and I want to say I specifically chose mine because I had a feeling one of you had to choose the suit.
It had to be. Yeah. Sorry, change one thing, Dustin.
I think we can always do with a little less of the tired trope between the conflict between local police and federal authorities. They're going to come in and take all our stuff.
I like where you're going with this.
That doesn't matter at all to this movie. I'd love the idea for the detective role here to matter more, Fanning mattering more, to not just revealing story arc to the audience, but maybe like adding to the ultimate success of Max over Vincent somehow. So I don't even know. I think we need the FBI in this at all, which fortunately takes away, your hidden gem here. But I just think for the rest of the things this movie does well, it was unneeded to have that. And in general, I like to call out that trope's overused.
It's a great choice there. Brian, change one thing.
It seriously drives me insane. I want to know what happens after. I want to know, do they go into hiding? Do they work it all out with the cops? Is Mark Ruffalo dead? The question marks I have at the end of this movie is just drives me insane. He didn't triple tap him like everybody else. He was in a hurry. He gave him 2. One of them was clearly in the shoulder because that's what happens in movies. So you don't know Mark Ruffalo. He could have been wearing body armor. You don't know. So the amount of I don't know what happened at the end of this movie after the fact, like is Jada Pinkett's character Annie high enough that she can be like, no, this guy's one of the good guys. He saved my life. He didn't do anything. Or is the FBI just going to roast him? I don't. Did someone end up finding him on the subway? Did he get away? Is he actually dead?
No, that's the irony, because he said it earlier. He's like, somebody rode around the subway and they never even noticed he was like dead. I mean, like, I don't like this town because of like, and ironically, he becomes that guy on the train. I mean, yeah.
And that's all fine, except that there are too many other questions. Like, you can have that artistic irony at the end of the film, but you can't leave me hanging on everything else.
And they did that too with the city. It's like, I hate this city. It's all sprawled out. And that's how they depicted it. It wasn't a very charming city with how they depicted it. Everything that Cruise said in that cab earlier on, like when he came in, came to be true. So interesting. Yeah. Frye always wants more. That's always his answer.
Give me a quick rundown of what, there's a way to do it quickly, but you got to give me more than, here's my effed up little mini hoodie over your shoulders. we're going to leave everything unresolved. Like, does she go and get the bad guy after this because they left one alive? So I don't know.
Sure, yeah. Was Fanning able to survive his gunshot wound? He can no longer keep up with the tail, but he's better used in like coming up with some extra evidence that in the end Annie uses he did get a trial the next day.
He gets all the witnesses,
which isn't going to start that day. But
feasibly, the bad guy does win in this and doesn't have to pay this guy because he's dead. So I don't know. There are too many hats on the ground at the end of this.
Yeah.
My change one thing is going to be very similar to Justin's, actually. I felt like the entire Detective Fanning line was unneeded. I just didn't think any of the police side of the story was even necessary. They go back and think about it. Remove all of it. Bruce McGill, I liked him. He's my hidden gem, but I don't think you need the police in this one.
I would say the only caveat to that isn't part of that police story arc. It's part of the police stop after.
When they pull him over, and those are like the no-name policemen, like investigating him. That was good.
That has more impact on the enjoyment of the movie than the entire arc of the detective.
The investigators,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
The investigators, not helpful.
Don't need it.
Yep. Best quote, Dustin.
If you open that trunk, they go inside. During the police stop.
That's a good choice, by the way.
Yeah. It's a short one. There's a lot of quotes from this one I liked, and a lot of quotes I didn't. But that one is whispered to Max from the backseat, and I thought, like, he's being serious. It's not just about like some thugs in an alleyway. I'm gonna ice these two cops if you don't fix this right now. And it's luck that gets them out.
And he already knows
situation.
that he cares about that stuff too, because
Yeah.
So, Brian. How about you, man?
You killed him. No, I shot him. The bullets in the fall killed him.
That's pretty good.
That is good.
I love that one.
That's a good one.
Why didn't you just kill me and get another cab driver? Because you're good. We're in this together. Fates intertwined. Cosmic coincidence.
Oh, I would have thought you would have pegged that as one of those over-the-top moments. Like
It was. It kind of was. It was, again, subtlety was thrown out the window here, but... I felt like it's one of those things I'm just going to remember from this movie. And like I said, it's not everything I remember from it's going to be good or bad, but just something that was so Cruise. I don't know. It's why people paid $100 million. Sorry, it's why people showed up to the theaters to $100 million for moments like that, I guess. So I think, by the way, that stuff works in a lot of other movies.
It might be the reason we're kind of dogging it in this movie is because it's worked in other stuff and it just didn't reach that same bar in this one.
Maybe. Yeah. All right. It's time to rate this movie on a 5-star scale with half-star intervals. Dustin, what would you rate Collateral?
I kind of like going first here because you had said to me, like, this was my dealer's choice and I presented this to y'all. So I kind of wanted to say, like, is this movie that I liked as a kid a good movie? And that's what I'm hoping to get from y'all is kind of a decision on a number scale. For me, after reevaluating, listening to you guys, and there was a great like shared resource that you sent to me, Russell, where there was a description about how our protagonist needs the antagonist to grow. And the first hour of the movie is learning, and the second hour of the movie is in action. And I thought, that's really cool. And it's something I didn't get as a kid, but I definitely get now. Even still, I think we've mentioned several shortcomings. The soundtrack is incredible, but they do one of my cardinal sins, which is using a version of Johann Sebastian Bach's Air. You should never do that. That being said, this is a 4-star movie for me. I still think it's a lot of fun, but it's got some flaws.
Yeah. Brian, how about you?
I went 3-star on this one, not because I think it's bad by any mark. I think this is actually a very entertaining movie. I like the fact that there are artistic flourishes that make it not just an action movie. I don't mind the slow burn at all. I criticize the ending heavily, but I find this to be a really entertaining movie, and I think it's got some rewatchability to it as well.
Yeah, it does have rewatchability, and that's what's picked it up for me. I have now joined you in the 3 Club. I quite honestly was not excited to come back to this one when Dustin picked this. So I was kind of like, oh, I did not appreciate it at a first time view. It was probably slower than I wanted, and I did not necessarily get all the nuances and the transformation of what was going on with Max's character. So obviously the flaws were apparent to me, and I still think some of my criticism showed through at the time. I remember leaving at the time thinking, was Cruise the right guy for this? And all, I mean, I had a lot of hard takeaways the first time. So anytime the first response was that negative for me, I think that it's come up a lot. 3 is an above average movie. So there's not 3 is not a bad rating. So I'm giving it a 3, but that seems low for our show. And
I hear. Well, I think it's just in a vacuum of this year. This year we've done some really incredible movies this year, and in a vacuum, the 3 looks bad. But I've been fighting for the 3 as a good rating, really since I started doing this. It's a very watchable film. If I give it a 2, you're talking about below average.
Below average.
That's fine. So don't poo-poo on a 3. I don't poo-poo on a 3.
We don't aim to cover like 1-star movies or 2-star movies, so 3, like you said, feels low, but it's not. It's not a diss.
I would not have given Valentine's Day a single star. I would have gone
half star.
Stars.
You would have broken your half-star rule and gone to the half-star.
I don't think you could have.
Yeah.
I think
whatever
this
the
is
lowest.
a 3-star movie for me if I didn't grow up with it, and it's not. It's not even because I selected it. It was just something that, like, I think if this were introduced to me, I would probably be left with sort of like, I think what you had when you left the theater, Russell, which was like, what was this? Was this right? Like, it takes a monumental effort to come out of the doldrums. So when you said like you were raising it and you raised it 2 or 3, I'm like, that's about as good as I could maybe expect.
Yeah, and hey, thanks for getting me to study this movie, because I'd be honest with you, I'd forgotten many things about this movie. I just knew that I had seen it and that I didn't love it. And that, like, if somebody's like, hey, did you see Collateral? I'd be like, I did. And I don't really have much to add on that. That is a movie that I saw. It's a very short podcast. So thank you, Dustin, for challenging me to come back and actually investigate this. There was something of substance. There was meat on the sandwich.
All right.
So do you want to help me pick a movie for next time?
Let's do it.
All right. I got 3 options here for you. Casablanca from 1942. A cynical expatriate American cafe owner struggles to decide whether or not to help his former lover and her fugitive husband escape the Nazis in French Morocco. Option 2. From Here to Eternity from 1953. At a U.S. base in 1941, Hawaii, a private is cruelly punished for not boxing on his unit's team, while his commanding officer's wife and top aide begin a tentative affair. And option 3, A Bridge Too Far from 1977. Operation Market Garden, September 1944, the Allies attempt to capture several strategically important bridges in the Netherlands in hopes of breaking the German lines. Dustin, what'll it be?
This is an easy choice. This podcast, it's time to do Casablanca.
Wow. Brian said we've had a good year, and it has been a good year. It's about to get even better. So Casablanca it is. Thank you all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us, so we want to hear from you. So subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. We love comments on social media, so like us on Facebook. Follow us at Twitter at @movie_retro. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. We're on Instagram. We're anywhere the internet is that you search for us anyway. Producing and providing this podcast is fun but not free, so we invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/Retro Movie Roundtable. All contributions are much appreciated and will go towards making the show better for you, the listeners. So as always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Brian?
Go. Sleep badly. Any questions? Hesitate to call.